does it feel like to be dominant, to desire to dominate? I cannot understand these feelings, and neither can any woman who calls herself a boss. Oh, thanks to infantilization, we may pretend that we have these traits, and these fantasies can become so integral as they are to a child's mind. We can convince ourselves we are naturally dominant. But our inclination is towards submission, to care for children, to help, and to nurture. To fail to acknowledge that is to welcome a deepening psychosis that can result not only in psychological episodes, but a complete warping, a demonic twisting of everything. Dans les ruines de la civilisation, je suis paladin du ciel. In the ruins of civilization, I am Eden Paladin. And I must apologize, for the hour is too late and the time too dark to speak anything but the brutal truth. If you're a woman, you must have experienced that wonderful rush of pleasure, even fulfillment, which comes with the thought of being helpless in the arms of a man. That firm yet protective embrace belonging to one who is master of his universe. Yet moments later, you probably hated yourself for having done so, as you were forced to reflect on the reality of this dark situation. The fact that you would be hard-pressed to find a man worthy of the title, let alone one upon whom you could trust. Our inclinations are submissive, to serve and help a protector and provider, so that we will feel comfortable at last performing that all-important function of bringing new life into the world. I admit, I have these inclinations myself. And I understand that there is one female experience that truly males cannot understand beyond the nursing and bearing of young, and that is fear. Fear of being considered the prey. Fear of acknowledging one's own physical weakness. Fear of having no support, no recourse, and no escape. As the female experience is so much fear, we retreat into isolation, misery, and depression. Indeed, all of the happiness indexes, all of the registering of samples have all agreed on one thing when it came to happiness. It decreased, the more feminism increased, the more the supposed wonderful manless world gained traction, the more miserable women became. In fact, women were actually happier than men before feminism began. This actually makes a great deal of sense when one considers how women's instincts, and that includes my own, are geared toward the conception, the nursing, the care of children. Take those children away, put them in more government, state-oriented daycare systems, away from the mother, away from the family unit, inevitably it's going to cause misery in the women who now have to go into these factories or other wonderful career jobs. Women tending to choose ones that deal with children anyway, but instead, being away from their own children, find themselves getting the aforementioned psychoses, mental disorders, another opportunity for big pharma to profit as well. Thus we have the ultimate question. How did feminism begin? Why was it allowed to progress so fatally far? And the answer is far more sinister than you would likely imagine. It's about time we started considering the possibility of the supernatural's involvement. The roots of feminism were quite occult in nature. I must recommend a book by Rachel Wilson called Occult Feminism, The Secret History of Women's Liberation. I'll be drawing a fair bit of its lore to further this revelation regarding the supposedly good movement and just how evil, unimaginably, literally, satanically evil the whole thing truly was. Wilson reveals that the entire feminist movement was not only created by men, but also heavily occult in origin, as I have said. In fact, there is a phrase that no suffragette has not been to the seance table. This procedure of attempting to call forth the spirits of the dead is popular among women. Even when I was little, I was invited to play parts in these seances. They seemed innocuous, but they are an abomination, as noted in the Bible. They're the conjuring of the forces of evil, and as I have learned firsthand multiple times, and sometimes in a rather hard way, demons are very real. Many were those feminist faces, the suffragette legends, who took part in very dark things. Victoria Woodhull, the first female president of the Equality Party in the 19th century. She was a snake oil saleswoman who sold faulty cures to cancer and cast various spells, literal spells, for her customers. One of these was Cornelius Vanderbilt, same one associated with the Vanderbilt fortune. Victoria Woodhull's faulty cures and her prostitution network, which of course she also had, were financed by Vanderbilt, for whom she was, quote, a spirit medium. Meanwhile, we have Alva Vanderbilt, or more accurately, Alva Vanderbilt Belmont, who was one of the primary founders of the suffragette movement. She married Cornelius Vanderbilt's grandson, then divorced him for one of the largest settlements in history, divorce being a thing almost unknown at the time. She then married his good friend, Rothschild investment banker Oliver Hazard Perry Belmont. He was also an occultist and died soon afterward, leaving Alva Belmont all his money. Alva Vanderbilt Belmont was now one of the wealthiest women in the entire Gilded Age. Let me show you what I'm talking about. The Gilded Age was specifically the late 1800s, the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s. We're talking about the very origins of feminism, of the suffragette movement. They had things to say about modest clothing like this, but that will be the source another video. It was evil from the commencement. The fact is, women getting the right to vote, especially in a two-party system, when one considers that democracy was always intended to be one vote per household, it makes some sense that the man would be the one delivering the vote. In a two-party system, this doubles everything up, and really makes the only difference of having a woman vote be her ability to vote against her husband and thus cancel out the entire family's contribution to the democratic process. With Ava Vanderbilt Belmont devoting most of all of her money to the suffragette movement, we have a real ground spring in place here. It's also worth noting that she wasn't the only wealthy one involved in this. It was very interesting how even then the global elite, the ones not affiliated with the Christian system, were very interested in putting forth this movement. The Rockefellers funded it. The women in the Rockefeller family were very occult themselves, one of whom was convinced she was a reincarnated Egyptian princess. But what about other joys of democracy? Well, how about public education? The ability for everyone to learn the official doctrine of the ruling. Elizabeth Peabody, Horace Mann, and John Dewey founded the public education system. They were involved in the Transcendental Club, our first encounter of trans in this whole thing. In this case, it literally involves transhumanism specifically. Elizabeth Peabody in particular was concerned with the education of young children, creating kindergarten. She believed that it would usher in the millennium spoken of in Revelation 20 and the new age of peace through this equality system. And believe me, when I was little, we were taught that this was a good thing. We weren't taught all about the dark involvements, but that this was the way to actually further the Christian ideal. I had an inkling in the back of my head that there was evil afoot, but I could not act on it, nor had I the information to elaborate on it. Instead, we do so here. Elizabeth Peabody and her friend Margaret Fuller were what is known as early gender abolitionists, the fruit of which you see in the modern trans movement, which isn't about changing from one sex to another so much as it is abolishing the concept of gender altogether. The biblical numerology is used here as 72 is the number of completeness, hence 72 genders, or more or less. But the idea was that doing away with gender was necessary to produce equality, universal, absolute equality, in a way that the Christian civilization could not. So the concept of the public education system was to indoctrinate children from a very young age into this idea of false equality, of the elimination of gender as a whole. That is why feminism coincides so well with homosexuality and transgenderism. They're all connected. They are inseparable to each other. They are the heads of the Lernaean Hydra of the war against God. Interesting how the dragon in Revelation also has multiple heads. So how did feminism get so easily sold? Were women so fed up with their confinement in Christian modesty and submission to their husbands? Well, the male had to be demonized so that the offering of protection from abusive boyfriends could be part of the lies. The idea of the villainous male or the untrustworthy male who will leave a woman was overblown by the media. It's ironic, and it would seem to make no sense because it doesn't make sense, but because it preys on emotions, it's accepted. At the same time, the promise of love for love. This led to the hookup culture and, of course, the encouragement of men to leave women and vice versa. Finally, there was the promise of financial independence. The independence coming from being a cog in the machine. Instead of being involved with people who really cared about you, like your family, your father, and your husband, you became one who worked instead for a faceless corporation. Your financial independence was being merely a cog in the machine. And as such, misery inevitably ensued. The concepts introduced by feminism were all lies, for lies are the weapons of cowards. And feminism was never more than a means by which cowards could control the world. Male and female roles established by civilizations throughout the world were consensual. Women still take the same jobs in a corporate environment that they did in a familial one. Secretary, nurse, kindergarten teacher, daycare worker, retail worker, cashier, cook. The same roles females had for centuries. Although we could also include HR professionals there, which is essentially having them use various female empathy or pretense at such to help keep people in line in sort of emotional blackmail or emotional control. So we have an environment where women are putting their skills to use for corporations and entering the workforce as though they did no work before. And as such, the corporations greatly benefit from this. And women were taxed as well, and this eventually led to it being nearly impossible for a family to be supported on the single income of the father. Thus, moms have to work, sending their children to daycare, public education, and indoctrination, communist ideals, but communism is clumsy compared to the techniques that are being employed here in democracy. The children are in kindergarten, in elementary school, before and after school programs, high school. These things all keep them away from the family values, all while Christianity is removed more and more, or vilified more and more, by media and the education systems. And then, of course, it was intense, as I can attest as a University of Toronto graduate, it was intense, the anti-Christ propaganda that was used in college, in university, this which was supposed to promise you the career of your dreams. Women hold 65% of all college debt in America. They average $40,000 a year in jobs, a lot of which would have to go to daycare, etc., if they choose to have a family. This is a slavery, far more than any imagined by the propaganda of feminism. No, feminism simply broke apart the family and did its best to separate all souls from God. This was a vital leap towards infantilization. For in order for adults, or those becoming adults, to be infantilized, they needed to lack a family unit, a father and mother who would properly educate them and allow them to mature. Likewise, infantilization was vital for feminism to succeed, for the kind of intergender hatred fostered needed an infantile mind that had not properly managed to consider all circumstances, to look into the other and understand them. People don't lean towards evil desires naturally, thus infantilization was necessary. It would never have made sense to a properly adult mind to assume that feminism, whose goals consisted of encouraging women to overcome the inadequacies of having not been born male, could ever have resulted in women being treated with respect. No. Feminism was neither freeing nor empowering. The only thing feminism ever accomplished was to tear females away from those who had their best interests at heart, and to destroy the only civilization, Christian civilization, with a Catholic Orthodox base, that ever truly respected or placed great value in women. Thus, we behold the Leviathan standing in the dust of civilization. For while men are the backbone of civilization, women are its lifeblood. To tear them both apart destroys all. The hope must begin with women. No matter how frightening it may be, we must rise above the misery that feminism has foisted upon us and embrace our true natures. Satanite women with a standard born by feminism, thus godly women must be those to undo it. Mary crushes Satan's head after all. I know that deep down we want to be kept under control, even dominated, but men aren't able to do it for us anymore. We don't need caveman blunt force oppression. That is the way of the invaders. We need a return to Christian chivalry. What was lost by Eve's no to God must be won again by Mary's yes. So let it be her whom we imitate. Her piety, her humility, her love.
Tiamat Michelle Hart said, proof feminism is crazy. Housewifery is hard and unfulfilling. Also, housewifery is easy. Yes, exactly. You are so right. They do this crap all the time. They'll tell me, okay, so this is another favorite thing that the feminists do to me. They'll go, well, it's really nice for you that you are so privileged to be able to stay home with your children because not all of us have that privilege. Some of us have to work. And I'm like, oh, really? I thought you just got done telling me that feminism paved the way for women to have the careers they desperately wanted and go to college and like be bosses. I thought that I'm supposed to be grateful to them for creating this situation.
Now needle heel went back into that. Oh. Have to be careful when filming outside. High heels are really useful in that sense when one is mounted.